Hello, everyone. Welcome to another live episode of Visual Studio Toolbox. I'm your host, Leslie Richardson, and today, a quick housekeeping thing. If you're trying to watch on Twitch, which you're probably not because you're probably watching .NET Community Stand-Up, apparently, so mosey on over to YouTube to check out this show if you're not there already. Sorry for the technical difficulties, it happens. But yeah, going from there today, I'm excited that we're going to be talking about web API development in Visual Studio. And joining me today is Syed from the .NET team. How's it
Hello,
going?
hello. Thanks for having me back, Leslie.
Yeah, always nice to see a regular face on the show. So, what's going on with web API development today? Like, can you give us like an overview or why it can be challenging and why it's important?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no problem. So, we've been spending a lot of it. So, yeah, one thing that I want to go ahead and recognize is that over the course of the last several years, the number of people creating APIs and the overall investment in developing APIs has really kind of gone up. And on the Visual Studio side, we've been noticing a lot of additional users developing ASP.NET Core APIs, and one thing that we're doing is basically reacting to that, and we're spending a lot of energy and investment in beefing up the API tooling that we have here today. And then in addition, we've already had a lot of investments for API developers in Visual Studio. So what we're trying to do is bring all the investments together and also try to go out and talk more about the existing features and functionality that we have for API developers. So what I was thinking to do here today was basically kind of talk about, how can we build an API and then focus on some new features and functionality that we've recently released here, but also talk about some existing features that have been there for a while.
Cool. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. So, chat, if you're looking forward to this and you have questions, comments, or concerns about the web API experience in Visual Studio, Syed is the expert for today. So don't be shy, write your comments in the chat, and we will try our best to answer them. So,
Yeah,
yeah, shall we
yeah.
jump in?
Yeah, sure. Great. We're going to jump
Cool.
into it. And before we get started, I wanted to say a quick hello to my kids who are watching. They're very young, 4 and 7 years old there. So hi Sonia, hi Same. Love you
Oh,
guys. All right,
Soaring and
so we'll go ahead yeah,
Lily.
yeah, they're going to be rock star developers hopefully one day. We'll see.
Sweet.
All right, so here I've got Visual Studio loaded up here, and I want to mention that this is not, this is a build that I've taken basically from like a PR build, and developer was making some changes here. And what I'm going to show you today, most of the things that I'll show are available in the latest Visual Studio 2022, but there will be a few things that I showed today that are not available, and I'll point those out, and we can talk through those as well. Okay, great. So first off, recently on the Visual Studio blog, I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago, I posted a blog about developing API projects. Let me bring that on screen here. And a lot of the things that I'll talk about here today are actually covered in this blog post. This is a very kind of long blog post here that covers most of the stuff that we'll talk about here today. And it's also backed by a repository here that's got all the code. And this is the project or solution that I'll be working with today. And there are instructions of how to get started with that if you were to clone this repository locally there. Okay, great. So
Awesome.
first, let's talk about building an API project there. So I will build on top of that restaurant API project that I have here, but you could follow the steps to recreate everything that I've done here. So here I've got an existing API project that I've developed. So what I want to do is I want to show, what were some steps that I did to actually get here, right? So first what I did was after I created the project, I'll then go ahead and create these model classes like the menu item model class, the contact model class, the to-go order model class, and so on. And then after that, what I did was I used scaffolding to actually generate my endpoints. And with scaffolding, you can generate API endpoints or API controllers. So if you prefer controllers, you can use controllers. If you prefer endpoints, you can use endpoints. And I did that once for each of the the models that were added there. So we did that. So I'll go ahead and we'll go ahead and do another one and see how that works. So I'm going to go ahead and right click on the project and say add new scaffolded item.
So what separates a scaffolded item from a regular item? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So a regular, yeah, this question comes up a lot actually. So a regular item is a kind of a fixed content, right? You know, like let's say if you're going to add a class to your project, it has a fixed set of content, but there are some replacements that happen, right? You know, every time you create a class, you get the same exact content, you know, minus the name that you provided there. Scaffolding is different. So with scaffolding, it's more dynamic. With scaffolding, you can provide parameters here, and then it will inspect your project and then generate a bunch of code based on that. So that's the kind of difference here between scaffolding and the vanilla add new item here. Yeah, that was a great question, Leslie. All right, so here I've got the scaffolding page loaded up here, and then a few different options here. So I'll pick API with read-write endpoints using Entity Framework. And like I mentioned, if you're more controller-based, you would pick the controller version of that. Did I add my... No, I forgot I need to add a model here. So let me add a new model class, actually. So I'll do add new class, and we'll say admin contact, I guess. And then I'm just going to kind of copy and paste the same stuff that I had for contact. Just because I don't want to avoid, just to save some time there. All right, I'm going to do a build with Control-Shift-B before I go into that scaffolding dialog there. All right, so let's try that one more time. Add new scaffolded item. I'll go to API, read-write endpoints with Entity Framework. Let me go ahead and zoom in on that one. All right, so we're going to pick the model class here. So I'll say admin. The endpoints class, where do we want that to go to? You can either select an existing file if you wanted it to go into an existing file, or create a new file. Go ahead and create a new file here for that one. The DB context, so we'll use the existing DB context, but you could always create a new one with the plus button. And this one's already been configured, so we don't need to select that. Go ahead and click add on that one. So this is going to go ahead and inspect the project and start generating the code, which will be added to my project, and we can watch the Solution Explorer for when those items get added.
Nice. Looks like a massive time saver as well, not having to figure out how to just write all of that even.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, sometimes this code is not exactly perfect, but, you know, it's always a good kind of starting point as well. So here what we've done is I've defined the admin contact model class, and then it created an admin contact endpoint. And this is the endpoint to get, for all the CRUD operations, right? Create, read, update, delete, so on and so forth. So now what you would normally do here is then go in and get your database set up, right? So this project is using Entity Framework migration. So if I wanted the admin contact table to appear in the database, normally I would have to drop down to the command line and use dotnet EF for those operations. But in Visual Studio, we've actually had this support for several releases here that we've integrated the Entity Framework tooling into Visual Studio. So I'll show you that experience. So I just double clicked on connected services to get to this new page. This project is using a SQLite database, so I'll use this menu here. So let me zoom in on that for you. All right, so here we can see we've got operations like add migration, update database, generate script. Let's go ahead and add a migration to this. Let me zoom out. We'll add a migration. That will eventually, once this process completes, we'll see a new file show up in this folder here. And one thing to keep in mind is, you see how I get this error here that says unable to retrieve DB context? That's because I have the project running. So if you ever run into that, make sure, do I have it running? Where is it? Oh, maybe, let me rebuild.
All right, also, folks in chat are asking if you can zoom in more. Like, you're already doing it a bit.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool.
Why is this not working? All right. Well, we're having some kind of problem on that one there. So
No worries.
That's what you would normally do. I'm not sure what's happening here with this project. But anyways, the flow would be add migration. That will add the migration and then run update database here. And then that's it. So let me see. Hold on just a second. Let me just make sure nothing's... Yeah, it's not running. Let me just try and do it one more time. Add migration. Okay. Wow, that's weird. Okay, is it building? Let me do Control-Shift-B. Yeah. All right, so we're good, I guess. Well, anyways. Okay, yeah,
Oh,
we've got
before
some
you,
kind of... Yeah, go ahead.
or yeah, no worries. I mean, the demo gods are fickle creatures, as I always say.
Mm-hmm.
But we do have a question from the chat. Do scaffolded items, or can they create unit tests and other things on the side?
We don't have any scaffolding right now for creating unit tests. But later for API projects in particular, we're going to explore being able to create those unit tests. But yeah, those are a great question. And always, one thing to keep in mind is if you have ideas or suggestions, you can always go to help, send feedback, and report a problem as for bugs, and suggest a feature would be a good idea for that particular suggestion that came through. And these will create issues in our developer community that we can then track and then implement at a later time. So that would be a good one for suggest a feature there. All right, cool. So let's go ahead and continue on here. So now we've got our API project developed. So now I want to talk about the how can I explore my API, and then how can I interact with my API. So one thing that we do have that's a preview feature. So let me go into Tools Options, and let me zoom in a little bit. Oh, that was the wrong button. Let me zoom in a little bit. So in order to, we have what's called an Endpoints Explorer, but that one's only in the, it's only in preview features, but the version of Visual Studio that I have here is actually beyond that. So the version of the preview that you have, search for endpoints, and then you'll see preview features, and then you'll be able to check that. But the version that I have, we no longer have that in preview features. It's gonna it's gonna make its way to the GA build there.
Cool.
All right, so then after you enable that feature, you can then go to View, Other Windows, and then Endpoints Explorer, so that we can see us here. So I'll go ahead and click on that one. That opens up my Endpoints Explorer. And then we can see I've got the My Restaurant API. So any web project that has API endpoints will appear here, and then their endpoints will show up as well. And
So that's
we
a new
can...
feature?
this is in preview features, but this has been available in the preview in the last few previews.
Okay, that's cool.
There'll be some additional functionality that I'll show later, which is not available outside of Microsoft. So we can see here I've got my endpoints for the menu items, for the to-go orders, menu items ordered, contact, and then also those ones that I just kind of scaffolded here as well, so we can see those. All right, so let's take a look at let's explore the contacts endpoint here. So let me zoom out one more time. So here I'm going to right click. Let me zoom in again. So there's a couple things we can do here. We can open in the editor that will take you to where this endpoint has been defined. And then we can also do generate request. So I'm going to do generate request on this one. So let's do generate request. Actually, let me close this file, and then we'll do that one more time so we can see the regular result here. Let me save that. All right, so I'm going to right click and do generate request again. All right, and then we have a bug where it generates it at the bottom but doesn't take you to the bottom. All right, so now this is what's called an HTTP file. So before I run that request, let me tell you a little bit more about this file and what's the content that we're seeing in here. All right, so an HTTP file, this is an idea which has existed for a while, actually. So in Visual Studio Code, there's a REST client extension which has support for these HTTP files, and I'll bring that here. And this is a very kind of popular extension in VS Code. So we took inspiration from this particular REST client extension here, and we're kind of trying to duplicate what they're doing here in Visual Studio. Initially, we wanted to see if we could reuse the open source project directly, But the way that this extension has been authored, it just directly calls all the Visual Studio Code APIs, so it wasn't really feasible for us to directly use this, so we're trying to recreate this. So the HTTP file is an existing format that's already out there, a bunch of files on GitHub and other places here. The idea with this file is that you can make requests for your APIs, and then you can keep this file as a part of your project. You can check it in. You can use it to ramp up new developers. You can use it as a testing and debugging resource. And you can also use it for documentation. So the basic syntax of these requests in the HTTP file is shown here. And so it's basically the HTTP method, the URL, and then that's it for a simple kind of GET request.
So is this kind of like a cheat sheet then?
You could think about it that way, yeah. I think people will use this in a variety of different ways. You know, like what I mentioned was, let's say in this kind of example, right? I'm building up an API. As I'm building the API, I want to exercise that API. In the past, you might have used tools like curl or Postman or PowerShell invoke web requests to do that. Now you can do everything inside Visual Studio. You don't have to rely on those third-party tools which are not integrated with your projects and solutions. So to me, you know, this is like a playground to explore and test your APIs. And then the benefit is that, you know, it can kind of get versioned along with your project, right? Like you can see I've got this checked into GitHub, right? And, you know, I've made some modifications here, and all those modifications are being tracked as well.
Pretty sweet. And like as somebody who's used Postman a lot in the past when writing APIs, like that's cool to see that now you can kind of do some of that similar functionality within.
Postman is a great tool, and, you know, I love using Postman too. But, you know, the thing that's frustrating about it is that it's not connected to my solution, my project, or my repository, right? So I load up a new solution in Visual Studio. I have to go hunt down the particular collection that I'm using. And then there's a whole bunch of tabs and all that kind of stuff. So this is just another way to kind of exercise your apps. And, you know, we're not saying this is a Postman replacement or anything like that. This is to supplement those other tools and to have a more kind of integrated solution there. So that's the way that I kind of view it. But, you know, every tool has its pros and cons, obviously. And people should be able to decide to use those tools as they see fit.
Totally.
So, yeah, that was... Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah, just before you transition to the next topic, we had a couple questions in chat that I find out.
Sure.
So the first one, this goes back to scaffolding or scaffolded files. Can you create your own scaffold templates?
I don't think we have that ability today, but we're actually revamping scaffolding and basically kind of redoing scaffolding. So being able to customize your scaffolded items and add new items there is going to be a top kind of priority for that new effort, but not for the existing one. The existing one, sorry, we kind of had to throw it together pretty quick when ASP.NET Core was coming up, and then we chose. What happened was scaffolding is actually using Razor behind the scenes, Razor syntax, to define those templates, and we've run into a lot of kind of issues with that because the project references Razor, and then scaffolding has Razor, and there could be conflicts on the Razor version there. So we're changing that. We're going to go back to T4 essentially, and then once we do that, then we'll bring a better command line experience as well. We'll bring the ability to add your own custom scaffolders. We're also hoping to bring the ability to customize existing scaffolders. So yeah, I think that's a part of our kind of long-term story here. But at this time, we don't have that particular kind of extensibility point. But definitely something we're looking at in the future.
Right.
Yeah, great question. Yeah.
Cool. And then another question in the chat is about the HTTP file. So how are authentication aspects handled in that file, especially with regards to secrets that are usually attached at request so that they don't leak?
Yeah, great question. So those are some new features that we have. So I will get into that here in a little bit. So later I'm gonna show some support for secrets, and then what's our kind of journey that we're going on here for that. So we will be getting to that very soon.
Exciting. Cool. And those
All
are
right.
the questions in chat for now.
All right, sounds good. So let's take a look at what we have here. So let me go ahead and run my application here. So I've got my endpoint running. And then, so the basic format of these requests in the HTTP file are the HTTP verb, as well as the URL. And then the triple hash is end request. So we always want to put the triple hash at the end. Let me go ahead and send this request. All right, so this is the view that we get back in the current version of Visual Studio that's out there. But what I want to do is I want to go ahead and show you guys a sneak peek of the new view that we're coming out with. So let me close this. I'm going to go once again to Tools Options. In here, I'm going to search for Interactive. And then there's this option here that says Use .NET Interactive to send REST API requests. And I believe this option is in the latest preview of Visual Studio, but if not, it'll definitely be in the next version. Let me go ahead and reopen that HTTP file. I'll send the same exact request, and then we'll get my response here. So now I can see I've got a more kind of structured response here. So we've got the formatted view with syntax highlighting. We've got the raw view here as it came in. The headers on the request, the headers that were the headers from the response, and then the request that was actually sent out. So we've got the URL as well as the headers and whatnot there. So yeah, so this is our new kind of view here, and you can zoom in and zoom out and all that kind of good stuff here.
That is really sweet and just, yeah, a really nice thing to have within the IDE.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
For me, it's a big kind of time saver here, having it right by your code as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's explore this this file a little bit more. So at the top here, we can see I've got these declarations here. So these are variables which have been defined. And then within the file, we can then reference these variables, right? So here I've set a variable for my local API project here, and then I reference that with these double curly brackets. Let me go ahead and send that request. Okay, and if I wanted to, I could replace this with contact route, and I messed that one up, so let's fix that. And then we can see that if I zoom in, we can see in the IntelliSense, we do also get the values that pop up there too. All right, so let's go ahead and send that request one more time. All right, so same kind of request there. All right, so now let's see if we can kind of modify some things here. So I made a request to get all the contacts. We can see these contacts currently exist in the database. I can send a request to get a particular contact here. So contact 3. So we can see we've got Eileen here for contact 3, and her phone number ends with 4 4s. Let's say if she had a change to her phone number, we'll then go ahead and get that one updated. So let's go ahead and get this updated. And this is a put, so that will update the existing contact. And the other part of the format was, so you've got your header line here that's got your method and your URL. And then after that, if you had any HTTP headers for the request, they would appear immediately after. And you can add as many headers as you want here. And then there should be a blank line, and then the body of the request. And this is a JSON payload here. So I see I've got JSON syntax here, and then the triple hash to signify that that's the end of that request. All right, so let me go ahead and do a send request here on that one to get it updated. I see I have a 200 OK. So let me get the contact 3 one more time. And then we can see that the phone number has been successfully updated here. So that's kind of the flow of using the HTTP files here.
Awesome.
All right. So let's kind of keep going here and see what else can we do here. So,
oh, quick question. So this view itself, is this also a preview feature?
no, the HTTP file is in the latest kind of GA versions of Visual Studio. The response view, as I pointed out before, is a preview feature that's in Tools Options. Search for Interactive there for that one. I can't remember if it's enabled or disabled by default, this new view, but yeah, go to Tools Options, search for Interactive. and then check this one that says use .NET Interactive to send REST API requests.
Awesome.
So that's something else that's actually happening here is this code is actually being executed by .NET Interactive. So we're working with the .NET Interactive team to hopefully bring HTTP file experience to .NET Interactive as well. We're not quite there yet, but that's kind of on our long-term plan. So that kind of explains the name of that preview feature there.
Sense.
Okay, great. So let's kind of keep going on here. So now, so I showed you how we can kind of get how can we do a regular kind of get request for a list, also the getting a particular object and then updating an object. Now we can also show you how to actually create new objects there. So I'll do a get request for all the to-go orders. So let's see how many to-go orders we have here. So there's just one order here, I think, at the time. Yeah. Let's go ahead and add another to-go order here with this post. So here we can see I've got the post with the correct endpoint here, the content type, as well as the JSON body for that. So I'll go ahead and send a request for that. Now we can see I've got 201 created here. The colorization here is not correct, but that's something that we're working on. So let me go back and get my to-go orders again. So I had ID 1 in the past. There should be ID 2. So there's ID 2, and we can see that it does kind of reflect on what we had here, $4.30, $4.30. All right, great. One thing I do want to point out, in this version that I'm showing, there are some updates. In the version that's available publicly, there's a green play button over here. So that green play button is going away, and we're just using the code lens options here going forward. So, so don't look for the green play button. Hit send request over here. All right, let's get into. So we had a question about secrets, and how can I deal with secrets and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk a little bit through that. So for the keen observers, you might have noticed this additional drop down that has showed up. So this is a feature which is not available outside of Microsoft here. This is something that I took off the developer's machine, and he's still got a lot of work to kind of do on this particular feature, but I want to go ahead and show you what we have here.
Ooh, behind the scenes, y'all.
Yeah, this is behind the scenes. So we've got an environment selector here, so I can pick either dev or staging. I'll go ahead and pick dev here. Let me zoom out, and then I'll explain how does this actually work. So if I go back to my Solution Explorer, if I zoom in, you can see I've got this file that's called http env.json. So that's a special file name. Let's go ahead and double click on that. All right, so here I've got a few things, and why don't we just, let me explain what we have here. So here, what I have is I've defined two different environments. One is called dev and one is called staging. And that was what we saw in the drop down above. And then here I have a few kind of options here which are flowing through. So we can see I've got message, and this just says hello from dev. And then I've got some additional things that we'll go through, but let's work through the message first, and then I'll come back to these additional options. All right, so now earlier I showed how can we define variables in the file, but one question is, how can I avoid declaring these variables in the file so that way then I can more easily replace these with different values? So that's what we'll show here. So I already kind of zoomed in, and I selected the dev environment here, and this comes from that file that we just looked at. So I've selected the dev environment. Other secret, where is that one? I was just playing around with this before, so let me get rid of that one. Okay, great. So now let's, why don't we actually, we'll kind of work through this actually. So we'll do, and I'll show you the IntelliSense experience here. So if I do, let me zoom in on the IntelliSense here. So some of these items are only defined in those env files, like the user DB connection string. So let's go down to that. We can see it now, it's getting Sayed's super secret value here, and that's from that dev file there. So let's pick the message one actually. That's the one that I wanted, was message hello from dev. And then let me show you how can we use this. All right, so I was going to use http ben.org. They were having some problems earlier with their it wasn't running good, but let's try it and see if it's working, and then it should echo that value back to us. Oh, okay, great. So now it's working good.
Yeah.
So we can see in the content, wait, let me run that request one more time. Yeah, okay, it's here. All right, so local message was the user DB connection string, and in the data, we can see that that's flowing through here. Content here, is that it? Let me scroll, let me make this bigger. Yeah, there it is. Sayed super secret value here. We can see that that is the value for message there.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I were to switch that to my other file, so if I go back to staging, okay, it's just hello from staging. So let me switch to the staging environment and then do that again. Oh yeah, that's right. That one wasn't there. Okay, so let me fix up my sample here. I need to copy this other variable that I'm referencing. Let me just copy everything into my staging environment, but the message is still different. Save that. I'll go back, do a change. Let's send the request again. Oh, okay. Yeah, so http://bin.org is having some kind of uptime issues here, basically. Yeah, all right, so that's not going to work for us today. All right, that's fine. Let's see, so that'll that'll take a minute to time out, I think. Let me just close this and reopen it.
While you're doing that, we've got another question in chat. I think going back to the response windows specifically, since we were talking about .NET Interactive. But since this uses .NET Interactive, that implies that under the hood, this is using the HTTP client. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Cool.
Yep. Okay, great. All right, so let's go back down. We'll keep going with this. All right, so now that answers the question of, how can I externalize some variables here? So the idea is that, I've added these variables into the file, and then you can easily switch those files to test against different environments, right? So imagine if you've got the host address in that file. It makes it super simple to test on your local host, and then in addition to other environments, right? So with this API, as I'm developing locally, I can use the dev environment, and then let's say I publish it to a different environment like staging. The staging version of the value of the variable could have the staging URL, and then all you have to do is change this from dev to staging, and then rerun your request to see if those are working, or if you have any problems that need to get fixed there on that deployment. So that was the idea there. So then the next question is, how can I deal with secrets, right? And this is something which the other tools that support this format, I believe, don't have the best kind of story there. And I'll show you what's the story that we're trying to come up with. All right, in the http env.json file, in this file, we can see that I've got some additional things besides just the message here. So here we support different providers for getting these values, right? So this one, so here I've got the name of the variable, and then the provider is encrypted here, and then here's the encrypted value. So these are encrypted with the Windows DP API, and then here's the encrypted value, and I have some code which actually can do that. So let me fire this up too, and we can show getting a. Well, we'll do that in a little bit, I guess. We'll show how to get that value, and then the ASP.NET Core projects have this concept called user secrets. So if you have any user secrets defined, you can also leverage those here. So let me show you how to get to that. So in your project, you'll right-click and then say Manage User Secrets. So that's the option that we're going to use. So I'll click that. And then that will open your user secrets file, and you can define your secrets here. And this is stored, I think, in like local app data or something. So it's roaming app data, and then it's nowhere near your code, so it won't get checked in. That's the idea. And this is the syntax for that. So we can say the provider is ASP.NET User Secrets. And then the path or the location for that secret is here, menu : service API key. That's the same syntax that you'll use in other places when accessing configuration in ASP.NET Core. And then in addition, we also have support for Azure Key Vault. So for the Key Vault stuff to work, you have to be signed in with an account that has access to this Key Vault. And I'm showing these values inside the file itself, but what you can also do is create a .user file. So I can go in and say add new item, JSON, and then I can create an HTTP env.json.user. And these user files are not checked in. So whatever you have in the env, HTTP env JSON, you can place those in the .user file if those are user specific and you don't want them to get checked in. But all those same things kind of work from the HTTP env JSON directly as well. All right, so let's take a look at that. Let's get that message hello from dev first, and I'll show it through the IntelliSense, and we'll hopefully get some good luck with the http bin.org as well. So local message, and then we'll say, was that just called message? Yeah, message. Okay, so let's go here. So we'll say, yeah, let me go down to message. So here we can see that I see hello from dev here. Oh, I keep hitting the wrong button for Zoom. All right, we can see I get hello from dev there for that one. Now let's do one of those secrets. So what was it? User DB connection string. And then that was the Sayed super secret value. And the other secret, I can't remember if that's coming from ASP.NET user secrets or from Key Vault, but I'm pretty sure the Key Vault is the API key one, so let's hover there. Oh, no, okay. This is the user secrets one, and other secret is actually what I have in my Key Vault, super secret here. And then this is a way for you to basically not have to kind of worry about secrets being stored as a part of this file. Let me see if I can execute that request, and hopefully that one works now. Local message, yeah. Okay. All right, great. So we had user DB connection string / API key / other secret here. So let me go to the request tab. Yeah, so content here, and then here it is. So Sayed super secret value / 12345 / the other super secret value here. So
Oh, can you zoom in on that one?
Oh, yeah. Let me zoom in on that one. My bad.
Awesome.
So that's where it is, and then we can see that that's being composed here, right? So user DB connection string is this one, and then we have / API key is that, and then / super secret value. So why don't we go and maybe we can change some of those values here in the JSON file. So hello from dev 22222. We'll create some sort of a tool to be able to encrypt these in Visual Studio, but for the time being, I've created my own. Sayed Sayed's new value here. And then this is using the Windows DP API here. And if anybody wants that code, I have it available open source as well. But like I said, eventually we'll create some sort of a tool for this.
Cool.
We'll integrate that, I mean. All right, so I saved that file. Let me go back to my HTTP file.
Oh, before you do the next thing, a couple more questions in chat. You're very popular today.
Sure, yeah.
So the first one, while we're on the secrets topic, there's some concern about potential security breaches that come with the HTTP files. So things such as accidentally checking in secrets. Is there any way to alleviate that?
Yeah. So I think, in most cases when you're referencing a secret, you'll put this in the .user file instead of the .json file. So let's go ahead and show that, I guess. So let me take that out of here. I'll save that file, and actually, you know what I'll do is let me copy everything, and then I'll paste that into, that's not what I wanted to do. Let's do that. I'll get rid of message from dev, and then here, I'll get rid of these things. But notice where I don't have any secret here, right? Where's my secret? I can check this in. I was planning on checking this in actually. This DP API, that's Windows Data Protection API. This is super hard to crack. This is per user per machine. So even if I signed in on this machine with a different user, I still wouldn't be able to decrypt that one. So I don't see there's no secret here. If you go in here and you type in secret, my secret, and then check that in, then yeah, you can definitely check that in, just like I can do an app settings.json or any other configuration file, right? So what I'll say is don't do that, and then you're not going to have any secrets checked in. But otherwise, there is no secret here. This one, nobody's going to be able to figure that one out. This is user secrets, and that's stored in roaming app data. So that's not, don't check those files in. You have to really go out of your way to check that file in. This is Azure Key Vault. And like I mentioned, you have to be signed in with an account that has access to this Azure Key Vault, and we're not doing anything kind of special here for that. So yeah, I would feel comfortable actually checking this content in, but there's no secret here basically. So yeah, but obviously developers, they can check in whatever code they want. So don't type your secrets in these files. That's what I would say.
Yeah, and we did have one more question about the HTTP file again.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so is there a way to run the contents of that entire file at once and get a summary of the results? And if things fail, can you get reasons for why each component failed?
Not yet. So that's something that we're looking at, and definitely something that we're interested in supporting. But let me explain more about the HTTP file, right? So like I mentioned before, there's an existing Visual Studio Code extension, and this extension has a lot of features and functionality that we don't support today. So we're going to start trying to kind of close the gap on those features. So I want to bring the Visual Studio capability closer to the Visual Studio Code capability. And then after that, then we'll start seeing how can we add more value on top of it, like, hey, a gesture to run all the requests in one go and then get a summary of that, and then lots of other ideas as well. But yeah, that's a great question there.
Awesome.
Yeah, so that's something that we're looking at in the future. In the future, we're also looking at how can I integrate this with CI/CD. So let's say if I've got my HTTP file, and every time I check something in, I want to run that HTTP file and make sure that there's no 400 or 500 responses. We'll come with that, and then hopefully we'll figure out a way to kind of customize the, did it fail or did it pass as well. So those are things that we're exploring. But the first thing that I'm really trying to do, for those that are familiar with the REST client, they have a concept of named request. So with a named request, what you can do is you can give your request a name. So here it is, for example, right? I'm going to log in. So you'll do your login. So this is your body for that payload. And you've named this request login. So then after you execute that request, you can then reference that and further HTTP requests. So here we can see they're defining auth token, and then that refers to the login request, and it's going to grab the auth header from this location of that request, and then it's going to pass it in to the subsequent request as auth token. So this is really what I'm trying to get at, but I'm also trying to avoid having secrets in the file, right? Somebody just asked about secrets, right? So that's the problem with this approach here is, you have the secret right here. Using VS Code Client, you can externalize these to their settings, which are stored in Visual Studio Code settings, but you'd have to have that secret in plain text in that file, right? So I'm trying to provide some options where you don't have to have the secret in plain text anywhere, right? You can use that encrypted provider with DP API, or you can use Azure Key Vault. You can use ASP.NET user secrets, but the problem is even with ASP.NET user secrets, that file, the value is not encrypted there. So this is really what I'm trying to go after, right? I'm trying to implement enough support to where we can do this securely. So that's why we're bringing the env file support along with support for secrets in a secure fashion. And then we're going to work on named requests so users can perform a request, get a value from the response, and then send that to the subsequent requests. But we want to do that in a secure way because we're all about security here, and we want to make sure we've created features in the past where people would accidentally kind of check secrets in, right? And and even I've done that myself. I have created a feature that did that. But with this feature, I don't see any. It's you don't have any secrets here. So yeah.
Awesome.
What else do we have, Leslie?
Yeah, we do have a couple more questions in chat, but I want to make sure that you also get through the rest of your content too. So yeah, how much?
Let's
How
go
much
through
were you
the let's go through the questions.
Okay, cool. So first question is, what's the best approach for APIs? So we're talking a lot about web APIs, obviously, but what about Azure
Sure.
Functions, when to use them and why?
Oh yeah, sure, yeah. So yeah, that's a great question, right? So you can either develop your APIs with in Visual Studio. You can create ASP.NET Core API projects, or you can actually create Azure Functions, right? And with Azure Functions, you can create a HTTP trigger endpoint, and there's other types of triggers there. What I would say is whichever kind of meets your needs and whichever approach kind of aligns with the talent that you've got there. But if you've got a big kind of Azure investment, it might make sense to look more at Azure Functions because you can kind of manage those and scale those in separate ways from like a vanilla API project that you have here. That'll run in like a host. So yeah, you'll have some different kind of options there. I think Azure Functions is a great kind of example. And with the Endpoints Explorer, we are hoping to we are going to add support for Azure Functions. I can't remember if it's there or not. If you did have an Azure function that had some HTTP triggers, I don't believe that they appear yet, but that's something that we're going to be working on to make those appear. And then from the HTTP file, those requests would just work as well. So yeah, great question there.
Cool. Keep the
What else do
questions
we have?
coming, y'all. Another question is, does the HTTP file only support Azure Key Vault? I'm assuming that's what KB is. Or does it support others like AWS or Confidant?
So right now we just have support for those three things that I mentioned before, which are the DP API from Windows, the ASP.NET User Secrets, as well as Azure Key Vault. I think I think when we release this, it probably will go out and this kind of having this particular support. But I think after that, one thing that I'll work on with the team is, can we have an extensibility point here? We can see that it should be easy to support additional kind of options here because this is all provider based. So yeah, we're going to explore creating an extensibility point for that, and then see if users can, maybe we can get some extensions created by the community, or maybe we can even create some of those support either for the other secret stores there as well. And yeah, that would be a great thing to send for send feedback, right? And especially for those kind of competitive tools, right? So if you want integration with the AWS services there, I really have to justify that, right? I mean, I will have to say, hey, I've got hundreds of users asking for the support. We need to go ahead and add it. So those kind of things really help when working with those kind of competitive platforms. Knowing that customers want that will help a big time there.
Awesome. Yes, so I think that's the batch of questions for now, if you want to keep
Okay,
going.
great. Yeah, let's keep going here. So I've removed those from the dev. Let me remove these from staging as well, I guess. And then let me see if everything. And you know what? Honestly, I haven't even tried this .user file, right? Like the developer literally finished this code like last night. So let's see if this works. I'm going to close the file and reopen it to make sure that it kind of rehydrates all those variables there. We'll go down to the bottom. I'll switch to dev environment. And then let me just take a look. Okay, so now we just have message and nothing else. Okay.
Who is the dev who worked on it? I
His name is Phil Henning.
cool.
Yeah, he's been
Phil,
around
if you're
for a
watching
long
this,
time.
awesome job. Can't wait to see the final polished product.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Where is that secret? Oh, it's up here. It's up here. All right, let's try to run this again. So yeah, his name is Phil Henning, and wow, he's a great developer. I've been working with him for a long time. He did and I think HTTP bin is kind of running slow again. Yeah, but Phil Henning is great. He also did the integration with new project dialog for .NET Core templates
Oh,
there. That was a big thing that we worked on together in the past. Let me zoom in on this. So the http-bin.org is not working, unfortunately, but we can see that I'm still getting all those values from that .user file, right? And
mhm.
.user files are excluded from source control, and they've been excluded from source control since like decades or whatever, right? I mean, even before Git existed, .user files were around, and whatever source control you're using should exclude .user files by default. So yeah, that's another way to kind of prevent any secrets from getting in here, right? So yeah, let me zoom out real quick, and we can see that if I go back to Solution Explorer, yeah, let me zoom in on this one. I don't know why it has a lock on this one, but that should have like, if there's an icon for excluded, oh yeah, it does. If I hover over it, it does say ignored actually, but my mouse cursor is giant, so it's hard to read that. I apologize for that. But yeah, this one's ignored, and it's been ignored since the beginning of time, essentially.
Nice.
So yeah, I think that is really the other thing that I wanted to kind of point out that we've added here recently is some more kind of support for if you have like any errors or warnings. We've added some tooltips here. Let me zoom in on that one as well. So it's saying, open bracket is not an HTTP header. So the syntax is the request line, any headers, and then you need a blank line for your body. So that's where we get that. And then if I were to mess up that format, we'll get an error for that one as well. And then let me send this request, and if http-bin.org is back up, but if it was down, you might have noticed when I got that 500 result, if it was down, or you know what, why don't we just do this? I will make a request to something that doesn't exist, and then we'll see what's the error experience there. Yeah. And then let's send that. And then there's nothing listening to that endpoint. So this is, yeah, so we can see it timed out, and then I get my little kind of a red X there to indicate that, hey, this request did not succeed. And for requests that do succeed, we'll get the little check mark that says, hey, it did succeed last time.
Awesome.
So that's kind of what we've got going on here. Any questions or comments? I think that's really the majority of what I wanted to show here today, Leslie.
Yeah, that is really exciting stuff. I sometimes I get a little intimidated when I have to do APIs for an app that I'm doing, and it's cool to see all these new tools that make it really easy to do all of like your testing work and all this stuff just within the same location, even, which makes me feel more motivated to just experiment and play around and see what happens if I tweak things, which is exciting. So, yeah, and I know you talked a little bit about what's coming next, but did you have anything else on the what's next for all of the web API features in Visual Studio?
Sure. Yeah. So I think in the immediate future, what you'll see is you'll see Endpoints Explorer go to GA. So I mentioned that this was locked in the Visual Studio preview feature, so it wasn't available to people that were not using the preview feature. So in the next release of Visual Studio, this will be in the regular features and available. The response view is something new that we're working on, so this will go to GA as well. Today you just get like regular kind of text here that you can't even zoom in or zoom out on. So we're working on that. The env file support will come, and that'll take a little bit more time, so that won't be in the next release, but hopefully the following release after that. So that'll take time, as well as with the user secrets. And then I mentioned that the kind of end-to-end that I'm going after here is really for the named requests. So after we finish our support for the env file, we'll then kind of work on the named requests. And then one deficiency that we have today with respect to the Endpoints Explorer is not generating stub content for like a put here or a post. So so if I right click on to go order and say generate request, it'll just generate you the header line here, but we want to have some kind of stub content here basically. So we'll look at the to go order object and create you a stub here that will make it a lot easier to then go and fill that out. So we're doing that. And then I think after that, we're gonna start trying to close the gap on the features in the REST client, right? So I mentioned there's a bunch of features here that we don't currently support, and I think I did kind of in my blog post. I kind of outlined, what are the gaps? Let me go to the end. I outlined, what are the gaps from Visual Studio versus the REST client, and then there's also a what's next. So here's kind of the gaps. So we need to close these gaps. And then for what's next, I did kind of cover that. So stub for the body request, what we just talked about. Close the gap with the REST client. Improved response view. We're starting to see the improved response view here, but this still doesn't really look great. So something that I'll need to work on here with the team. Show HTTP files in the Endpoints Explorer. So today we just showed the projects with their endpoints, but also like to show the HTTP files in the Endpoints Explorer. Another thing I'd like to do with the Endpoints Explorer is to show external APIs via the Open API spec. So if you're calling an API that you're not developing, you should be able to import a Open API spec either by URL or by file, and then have those appear to where you can then generate requests on those. Let's see what else. Request history. So yeah, so that's something, you fire off your request and, maybe you wanted to see the previous request and then maybe modify that request slightly and then resend it, right? So I'd like to have some kind of request history window or integration with request history somewhere so you can view all the requests that came in and then make a slight edit and then resend the request. Yeah, so some sort of UX to simplify making a request. So today everything is just in text, but maybe there's another world where we can have a UI, either similar to Insomnia or Postman or Swagger UI that will help you actually kind of build that. So that's some ideas that we have. And saving the response body to a file. So when you're working with those APIs, you might want to save the actual response. So I'm hoping to have some kind of save response button over here for that. And then I think testing is a big kind of area that we're interested in, but don't have any specific plans, right? So how do we want to, if we have an API, what's the right way to kind of test those APIs, right? Not only, unit tests, but integration tests as well. And that's just a big area that we're interested in looking at, but we don't have any, very concrete ideas here yet. If anybody in the community has got some kind of ideas here, concrete ideas for testing, definitely let us know. And then any requests in general as well, let us know about that too. And in the blog, at the bottom of the blog post, I do have some kind of links of how to make those suggestions as well. But yeah, I think with the things that are kind of outlined here, we have a lot of work ahead of us, especially here in the testing space, because we're not really sure what we're going to do there. But even minus all that, just kind of closing the gap with the HTTP file syntax is going to take some time here. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I know we're at time, but if you have some time, we got like 5 questions. you were
Yeah, sure.
so
Yeah.
maybe we could do like a quick lightning round of questions to round
Yeah, sure. No problem. Let's go
end this
for it.
out. Cool. First question. Is there any support for integration with Azure API management or Google Apigee or AWS API gateway out of the box or HashiCorp Vault like Azure Key Vault integration? We kind of answered this question or a
I
variation of this question earlier.
Yeah, so I don't have any. We don't have any integration with the things that are mentioned besides Azure Key Vault. I'd love to learn more about what are your specific ideas about integrating with API management as well as the other products that you listed there. Feel free to shoot me an email. I think I've got my email at the bottom of this, or maybe I don't. But my email is sayedha. Let me put that up on the screen. So anybody who, if you got some kind of like, detailed kind of proposal here, feel free to send me an email. It's Sayedha at Microsoft. Make that a little bit bigger. So yeah, so any detailed kind of feedback, feel free to email me directly on that one. And yeah, I think the integration with those other products, it'd be, I haven't thought about those things. So yeah, if you send me a suggestion, I'll take a look at it. And to be quite frank, I'm not like, an API expert over here, right? I've been doing a whole bunch of other stuff too, right? So I really have to leverage the community and the actual experts to figure out what's the right way to do this, right? So I don't know all these things, right? And it's impossible for me to know everything. So if the community can help me with these things, I do greatly appreciate that. And I listen to the community too, and I hope I got some kind of, I hope people know that, for people that know me, I hope they know that I'm listening to the community. Yeah.
Awesome. So then question number 2. Can we run and modify the APIs and Azure Functions on Azure Portal after publishing them without having to republish?
Can we run and modify the APIs and Azure Functions on Azure Portal after publishing them without having to republish again? Okay, so no. So if you have like an ASP.NET Core Web API, and if you publish that to Azure, you have to publish it to an endpoint, right? So one example would be Azure App Service. So you publish it to App Service, and then you make your request. But if you want to change the API, you have to republish. For Azure Functions, I don't believe the Azure portal has any ability to modify the Azure function. I think you'd have to do that from your local kind of IDE or editor, and then re-upload that. But I'm not totally sure on that one. But I don't believe that's a viable kind of scenario there.
Cool.
Yeah.
Question number 3. Does Endpoint Explorer only support the minimal API approach? Not seeing any of my controller API endpoints. No need to debug live. Just yes or no / see more kind of answer.
No, actually, it does work with controllers, but we had some bugs over here that have recently gotten fixed. So I'm firing up another instance of Visual Studio to show you that. So this is an older API that I have developed over time, and this is controller based, and I think I created this when controllers didn't even exist, actually. So let me go to my Endpoints Explorer. I can see I've got my templates API, and this is something new. So this bug was recently fixed. So if I was using the public preview, you would only see like 3 or 4 items here. But now we see all of them basically, and these are controller based. So yeah, there was some bugs there, but we're working on getting those fixed. And if your controller or endpoints based endpoints don't appear in the Endpoints Explorer, please do file an issue with report a problem so we can fix that.
Gotcha. Right. So we're gonna answer 2 more questions, and after that we gotta call it. But if you just heads up, if you have any other further questions and stuff, Syed just shared his email as well as he's got his Twitter handle right there. So don't be shy, reach out and ask all of those questions. And of course, you can also share your feature suggestions and bugs that you're experiencing on dev community and any of the other channels that are also mentioned in that blog post, which I will link back in the chat later in a second. Yeah. So question number 4. Is Endpoint Explorer integrated with GitHub Copilot to generate unit tests or documentation? Which I think would be a great idea
yeah.
already.
Not yet. So like I mentioned before, right? I think before we add those really great kind of features, we really need to close the gap with the HTTP file itself. So like I said, HTTP files already exist. There's a bunch on GitHub. So what I want is If you open an existing HTTP file in Visual Studio, that should work. And we're not quite there yet. So I want to close that gap. And then I want to do the additional kind of things that are being recommended here. And yeah, we would look at Copilot as well during that kind of generate test as well. Yeah. Great,
Awesome.
great question. Thank you.
Yeah, these are really good questions. And last but not least, will we get a geographical report for the APIs and functions to show from where the request came from?
Okay, sure. So this is a tool. This is a tool that's developed for developers developing developing or consuming APIs, right? So, this is not something that's sitting on the server side watching all your requests that are coming and going, right? So I don't see the value, and usually these are running on localhost or what? This is the wrong file. Usually they're running on localhost, right? So I don't really see a value of having a show me the geographies which these have come from, and that would really need to be implemented on the server anyway. So it'd have to be in your own code there, right? So I think for those types of things, wherever you publish your API, you need to look for those types of features from the hosting, whatever's hosting your API needs to bring those features in. Yeah.
All right. Well, that was the end of the lightning round. Great job, Syed.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Leslie.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. I thought that was super informative, jam-packed with a bunch of new features that I think will make it a lot easier to develop web APIs. And for folks in the chat, thank you for all of your awesome questions. Thanks for some of you who it sounds like you're actually trying it out right now. And we encourage you all to go try out these features and share your feedback either with Syed directly or on the developer community or the other repo channels that we have available. And don't forget to check out the blog post that has in full detail all of the features that we just talked about today and then some. So yeah, thank you so much, Syed. Can't wait to have you back.
All right. Thanks, Leslie.
Sweet. And thank you, everybody else. So go try out the new tools and happy coding, y'all. See you later.
Bye-bye.